DELTARUNE, the first chapter soundtrack released on a single LP, originally released in 2018 and published by FanGamer.
Alright, what's going on, Forgotten Nation? I'm your host FG, and welcome back to another vinyl hands-on session. UNDERTALE released back in 2015, and there's no denying what a masterpiece the game was and its cultural impact we see even to this day. But the biggest question was at the time, where does UNDERTALE go from here? Rather, what does Toby Fox have in mind for what comes next? Little did we know that the answer to that was in the form of DELTARUNE. What could have been a one-off is looking to be a massive project in the making, with, at the time of this recording, over 7 chapters, with 5 of which still in the making. And that extends, of course, to the soundtrack. Today we're going hands-on with Chapter 1 of DELTARUNE's soundtrack to vinyl, a single LP released by FanGamer, who, if those know it, they are best known for having released the complete UNDERTALE box set. However, DELTARUNE actually does predate that release, which means this is FanGamer's first take on one of Toby Fox's original soundtracks. But how does it fare compared to the already established box set? Let's go hands-on with DELTARUNE Chapter 1, starting with a little bit about the game.
Released in 2018 as an unannounced surprise by Toby Fox, it was later revealed to be the sequel-not-sequel to the critically acclaimed UNDERTALE, an alternate universe to said game. Though we got some familiar faces here, this is a story with a new cast of characters and a new world to explore. When Chris and Susie unwillingly discover a realm of darkness, a prophecy unfolds in an effort to restore the balance of light and dark. A trio of heroes, a human, a monster, and a prince from the dark realm, set forth to seal the dark fountains, unleashing worlds of illusion and grandiose, and some hostile monsters along the way. Full of enhanced gameplay elements and wacky scenarios, the first chapter is a free-to-play adventure RPG with bullet hell elements that is a must-play for both fans and those looking for a good time.
The scope of DELTARUNE is looking much bigger compared to UNDERTALE, but part of it is because it is a bigger game comparison. But if there's one thing I could say about Chapter 1 specifically, it's that this stands out as its own unique thing. Much because this could have been the only thing we've seen of DELTARUNE. Before we knew that it was going to be a major chapter project, Chapter 1 could have been its very own standalone game, and had there been nothing else to follow it, it would have been fine. I think all the pieces are here to tell its own individual story, but because of the big project we have here, DELTARUNE is looking to be a much bigger project. And I can't wait to see where it goes from here in terms of storytelling, character interaction, and just further establishing the world of DELTARUNE, and how it stands to be a little different from UNDERTALE before. Overall though, Chapter 1 is an excellent introduction to the story, and it's free as a matter of fact, so if you haven't played UNDERTALE, or if you already have some expectations in place, highly recommend checking out DELTARUNE, even if just for the first chapter alone. That's a bit about the game, but let's talk about the reason we're here today, the soundtrack.
Composed by none other than Toby Fox, the soundtrack of DELTARUNE follows the same setup as UNDERTALE, full of tracks that follow a common melody and make use of leitmotifs. In the case of DELTARUNE, the main motif is a vocal theme known as Don't Forget, and can be heard through several tracks across the game. Similarly to UNDERTALE, this soundtrack finds a balance between the ambient, the suspenseful, and of course the standout tracks in each area. A good mix between chiptune and organic instrumentals, including the piano. With a total of 40 tracks on a single colored record, take part in an adventure that's full of heart.
So the biggest question I'm certain that many may be asking is, how does the soundtrack fare compared to UNDERTALE? Well, I don't think it's fair to really have that big of a comparison, especially even if we do treat this as its own standalone thing. I do think what we have here is already great, but I do think that UNDERTALE is the better product. But it's not to say that what we have here doesn't hold that high a value. We have some excellent tracks on display here, and that's not even talking about the ones that we'll be hearing through the rest of the game. We have our overworld themes, we have our battle theme, which is an absolute banger of a battle track, which is very important for any RPG as a matter of fact. But overall, I think what we have here is enough to stand out as its own. Heck, we have a vinyl to show for it. but I do like it. I just don't think it's as strong as Undertale's soundtrack. But who knows, that could change with the later chapters. But anyways, what we have here is already an excellent piece that belongs with the rest of Toby Fox's work. And I'm so glad to have it here in a vinyl format. I do want to point out though one major thing. Just like with Undertale, there are many tracks in this release where the speed, the pitch, call it what you want, is different from how it appears in the game. Here's a small little comparison to show what I mean. There are some I actually do like better here in its normal format. Friendship, for example, sounds like it came right off the NES. But then there are some where I do wish it was made to match how it showed in the game, such as that opening theme when you're choosing a character. It's small, nitty-gritty stuff, but it is here, and I'm sure that because it's here in Chapter 1, we'll be seeing it as we move forward. So just a thing to keep in mind that I'm only going to mention here, but it is present nonetheless. Overall though, this is an absolute solid soundtrack that definitely stands its own weight compared to Undertale, but don't go expecting the same... don't go expecting the same as Undertale. That's a little bit about the game and the soundtrack, so now it's time to get hands-on with this vinyl release, starting with the presentation.
The outer sleeve contains an original art piece of the cast of characters and a unique art style that feels more on the realistic side, heroes front and center.
The outer sleeve's artwork features art that's very reminiscent of a Saturday morning cartoon. And I say this in the best way possible. It's very different from what we've seen with other artwork from the Undertale collection. And it's really cool. But what I love about it most is the use of colors and its composition. Everything here perfectly displays what we see in Chapter 1 from the characters, the environments, and the overall vibe of what you could expect. It's not Undertale, and it's trying not to be Undertale, but it perfectly captures the mood that this is something much more intense. And I love that it goes for a more realistic style on the front. But that's not even it, there's even more!
The back of the outer sleeve is an art piece that perfectly summarizes Chapter 1, a contrast between realism and fantasy.
Now the backside feels very much more like what we saw with the later FanGamer release for the complete Undertale box set. Not only do we have some great colors on display here just like the front, but it focuses a lot more on the lesser characters of DELTARUNE's first chapter. But overall, I like the contrast here between reality and the Dark Realm, which of course plays into the story elements. Overall, it's a neat little piece, and I love the work that went into this one. Both have their pros and their cons, but overall are some excellent display pieces that perfectly capture the world of Chapter 1. And I can't complain, I love it.
Inside, we got a paperback inner sleeve, one side on the basic end, featuring a golden gate that kicks off the chapter's events. More on the basic side, but the reverse side features the Delta Warriors and Lancer jamming out. Once again, this art style is completely unique.
The inner sleeve is a basic paperback, which frankly could have been a lot better. Part of this is because of the type of vinyl we have here, but I do think we could have had it just been a little better. You might notice off the top, I'll talk about this in the next part, that I actually did fit in another sleeve to protect the vinyl. And honestly, I would recommend it, because paper just doesn't always work that well if you want to prevent scratches, scuffs, or any gunk that gets in between. But anyways, talking about the inner sleeve, I love the artwork that showcases all the characters on display here. Once again, we have 3 different art styles on display here, each one very different from the last. While my favorite still is the realistic on the outside sleeve, I love here is also again the use of the colors, but also just the vibe that it gives off. They're all jamming away, everyone's buddies. Heck, even Lancer's on this one too. But I love this side. The door though, while it is subjective to the chapter, is a little more on the basic side. Hey, maybe it's the gateway to something amazing. I'll leave the interpretation to you. But no, overall, I love the other side that's got all the characters just jamming out. I just love it.
The vinyl for this release is a marbled green. As for the label art, we got the 4 mentioned earlier in the forest area in the A side, and an encounter with the Jevil on the B side. Certainly an eye-popping choice.
The sleeve I've used for this is actually known as the Mo5 Master Sleeve, which actually helps between static, scratching, and it is considered archival quality. If you have extra money, I highly recommend getting them, as not only are they way better than the standard paper, but it can also go a long way to trying to preserve your records. As a matter of fact, for the outer sleeve, I also have a generic plastic one that I use more so for the ones I haven't listened to in a while, but I've made an effort to trying to coat all my records. But that's a video for another time. Let's talk about the record here. What we have here is very similar to what would later be the complete Undertale set, where it's not just a standard slate, it's actually more of a marble design. So you see a lot more accents in terms of the colors. You can see little streaks of white and black. Overall, I love the look of this. Not only does it perfectly complement the overall vibe that we get from Chapter 1, being in the field and the forest, but it's also unique compared to just being a standard black. And I love that they use for the label art here, the sticker, how it rotates with them as you're going along the journey. And heck, even using the Jevil on the other side, love the attention to detail. That's the presentation, so now let's talk a bit about the quality of the vinyl. I'll be honest, it certainly could be better. Now, does it compare to Undertale's version? It's a lot like the problems I had with that one, where in particular, it's towards the beginning and the end of the vinyl where I start to notice a lot more pops and crackles. For some, that's an annoyance, for others, they don't care. In my case though, it's the later tracks where it's much more on the somber side, where you notice it much more. So it is kind of annoying in that case. But if it's any consolation, this release does come with a download code for Bandcamp. So if you want a digital version, this is one of the best ways to get that. Because plus you have something physical to show for it. So this one's got some pops and crackles, but other than that, I think it does sound great. If you can look past that, of course. Don't believe me? Well, let's go hands-on with a couple of sample tracks from DELTARUNE Chapter 1. Considering this is only one chapter in a much bigger project, I would say we have a lot to look forward to. But if we treat it as its own standalone thing, I would say I am impressed with it, but it could have been just a little better. In terms of this vinyl release though, I absolutely love the presentation we have here. And if you look aside the pops and crackles, I think what we have here is an absolute killer soundtrack for the turntable. And is one that I can easily recommend to anyone that's a fan of Undertale, Deltarune, or is looking for something a little different to have for their turntable. And of course, I'm looking forward to what they have in the future. As a matter of fact, I would almost say it's almost time to check out the next chapter, if you know what I mean. But in any case, that's going to do for this hands-on session of Deltarune Chapter 1. My favorite track this session is, without a doubt, Rude Buster. If there's one crucial thing when it comes to any RPG, it's the battle track, because it's the one thing you'll be hearing the most through the game. And Toby Fox absolutely killed it with this battle track. We're going to be hearing much more of it in the later chapters, I'm certain. But overall, just being here in Chapter 1, absolute banger of a track. If you want to see more videos like this, the best place to let me know is in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Now, if you're telling me there's a whole adventure to be found in the closet, I'm willing to say that's worth checking out. You know what? Let's see.